so calm.
Yeah.
I don't really react to negative things.
Yeah.
Hearty, step right up. The greatest show on earth is about to begin. Ken Lichfield doing fermentation.
P.T. Barnum, huh?
P.T. Barnum and all that in that center.
Yeah, thank you. When I was a kid, I actually learned to do hawking by going to the Dallas County Fair in Dallas, Texas, where they had a sideshow and they had all kinds of hawkers there, and it was like, oh man, it was the most fascinating place to see all the, in those days they had real sideshows with real deformed people that were making money off of their deformities, which was, I thought was, as a kid, is like fascinating to see these people, and then crawling under the tents and seeing them behind the scenes and how they actually live their lives and talk about things and talk about other people and stuff. It was like, well, this is very enlightening, you know, because they're like regular people, they just look really different, you know. In those days, it was like they had Frog Boy and Leopard Girl and all those things, because they had various, usually weren't skin diseases, they were genetically inherited things that happened to them, and they just, but they could live with them and they could make money off of them. So
yeah.
Anyway, and that sometimes is the only place they could be accepted too, is in our society back in the 50s. So that just told you how old I am, I guess. I'm a 60-something guy. So anyway, so my name is Ken Lichfield. I teach all kinds of classes. I'm a gardener and a herbalist and I have a very loose definition of herbalism. So it's anything that makes life better. And so the analogy I like to use the best is, my favorite thing is an herbal moment. And you have herbal moments all the time, depending on where you are and what you're doing. But my favorite herbal moment to just share, did I share this herbal moment with anybody before? I don't remember how many people in this crowd may have heard it or not. But I always plant salvias around wherever I'm gardening and to bring in the hummingbirds. And so they see me taking care of the salvias, and that's their food, so they kind of associate me with their food. I never use bird feeders. I always use real food, you know. So I plant all these really floriferous, and I always test one of them look really pretty, but I want them to have nectar in them. So I only get the varieties and the flavors and the new hybrids and stuff that still have nectar in them. They haven't been hybridized out. So I plant all these things, and they come and they enjoy them, and I'll be busy with something in the garden, and I'm just sitting there watering and doing puttering stuff. And one day I'm sitting there watering, got a nice rain nozzle on the hose, and a hummingbird comes and hovers right in front of me. I was like, oh, that's cool. Hi, how are you doing? And he looks at me, and he's like, you can just see, he looks over at the water, he looks back at me, and he looks over at the water. He's hovering right there at me. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then, so I was like, what's he going to do? And he's sitting there looking, then looks over, looks, and then I was like, he just goes, and he does a breaststroke right in the thing, and he comes back out, and he looks at me, and is like, oh, that was cool, and I just hold it out there, and he goes, and comes right back.
Wow.
Did that 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, well, that's cool, I'm just going to hold this for you. And then he goes, well, hovers, goes and rides it down, comes back up and just looks at me like that. I was like, go ahead, go ahead. So he did that 2 or 3 times, and then he goes off. I was like, that to me is an herbal moment. Does everybody get the advantage of an herbal moment? Now, all I have to do at any time I want is think about that little herbal moment, and whatever's going on, whatever's stressful, whatever's not, I've actually tested myself. I go to CVS and I go to Safeway, and I sit down to their little blood pressure thing, and I think about what's going on, see if it's bothering me too much. Maybe my blood pressure goes up a little bit or doesn't. Then I can see, is it really bothering me? But if I ever think about it, I can just think about the little hummingbird herbal moment. Goes right away and flatlines, and I'm good with, I know that everything's fine. So that is what I define as an herbal moment, and that is something that I like promoting, so that here's a way you can take your little postage stamp garden or balcony or whatever it is and put something on there for nature, and nature will come to you. Even if you live in the most harsh cubicle world of an apartment complex, you can have a pot of salvia out there for the hummingbirds to come visit you. And they often live in cities and stuff like that where there's lots of gardens. People do this, but they are as always looking for places, and so you can just help them, and gives you an herbal moment because now you're communing with nature again. So many herbalists will collect their stuff in the wild and promote wildcrafting. I promote cultivation of the herbs. So you go out in the wild, collect the herbs, cuttings, seeds, things like that as a living tissue, bring it back, harvest some of the leaves off of it, cut it and make cuttings, root them, plant them, and then take them back to the wild and put them back in the wild. So this is a more responsible way of doing herbalism. I promote anyway. So among the ways that you can imbibe, oh thank you, among the ways you can imbibe, oh you want to put black ant stuff in there? Sure.
For the select
Sure.
few daring ones.
Sure. Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So,
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
no problem. So, among the ways that you can do your herbal stuff is you can take pills, you can take capsules, you can make teas, you can make soups, you can add it to your food. You can just make, I promote growing it because you're sitting there working with the plant while you're growing it. You absorb, you smell, you interact with this other living being, and you get to know the plant itself that's providing these things, and that in itself, I say, you're gaining the molecules off of that plant one way or the other. So I promote grow it. You will know the plant better, and all of its then different preparations that come off the plant that could change various ways that it's used. So one of the many ways that I like to promote is fermentation. So there's many different ways of fermenting, and this is fermentation in the sense of, well, there's a scientific type of fermentation where you do this process and that's true fermentation, and then there's the art of fermentation that includes all these different practices, which includes fermenting things with yeast from sugar to make alcohol, or having a SCOBY. How many of you do kombucha or know what kombucha is? You have your own SCOBYs and things. That's a good way of doing all kinds of things. When you have an organism and it's adapted to certain conditions, like on kombucha, you have oriental tea and sugar, plain white sugar. You can add all kinds of other things to it if you want to, but best is to have a mother that you're always doing it what it likes. When you've got the mother growing good, then you take a little bit of juice out of there, you take a little piece of the mother, and you add it to fresh tea and fresh sugar, and you keep it going or you reproduce it. Now, if you have a good batch of it, you can take most of the mother juice out, leave the main mother in there, which looks like a mushroom. It's kind of a leathery looking, hunket, weird looking thing. It's like an alien being, which it basically is, and it's a combination of bacteria and yeast. The yeast takes the sugar, ferments it into alcohol, and immediately the alcohol that's being produced is eaten by the bacteria that convert the alcohol into a vinegar or acid type product. So that way what you're getting is something sour, and it may have a little bit of alcohol in it at the moment, but the alcohol is constantly being converted. So they get the idea? So that particular one is like, this is yeast, but it's making alcohol, but there's no bacteria in there to convert it into kombucha. However, you could take your kombucha, you got a jar full, pour off most of the juice, add fresh tea with a little bit of juice still in there, and the mother still in there, and it will re-ferment and continue going with the same batch like it's normally doing. To the secondary batch, you add any herbs or juices or flavors or whatever you would like to, and that's the secondary ferment. So you've taken the mother, it's got all the organisms floating in there doing their thing, and you put it into here, and now you've got, oh, it's doing all kinds of stuff. It readapts here, but it may or may not make a great mother unless you keep growing it in here at that same exact prep. But if you're prepping every time, you may have a custom prep that's hard to remember all the ingredients you put in here. So it may be difficult to get a mother of just that. But it's always easy to get a mother of just oriental tea and sugar. Does that make sense? You constantly have this one going, pour out the juice and add the goodies to it you want, seasonally, however, whatever out there, and the things that you think you need at that moment. And now you will have a healthy drink that's pre-digested and customized, and it's all the flavors are kind of blended together, and it's like, ooh, that's that batch. If you want to customize that and always have it the same way, you're going to have to remember every little ingredient, and if you do it chef style, it might not be exactly the same every time. Does that make sense? So this one is a ferment that I'm customizing according to Vadim's presentations. So we're going to do this as if what you could do is add, and he gave me black ant of all things to add to this, so we can do that. What's in here right now is basically this, I didn't take any particular juice. I just went to Trader Joe's and I got these 3 juices. This is blueberry and the label fell off, but you can get straight up blueberry juice. These are not the cocktail type things, these are just the juices that they have. And then they have this new power thing they're calling Power of 7, so it's got a bunch of, it has a blend of organic, pomegranate, tart cherry, black mulberry, red grape, purple carrot, cranberry, and blueberry juice. Lots of antioxidants in there. And they actually taste quite tart and so forth. And so then I have cherry juice, this Power of 7, and blueberry. And I'm not promoting Trader Joe's products or anything, I'm just using that as an example. These are already pasteurized. Don't have to do anything, don't have to cook them, don't have to boil them, don't have to squeeze out the juice, don't have to do nothing. If you would like, during the summertime season, when you got cherries coming on and blueberries and all those goodies that are out there, you just pick out the best ones you like, let's say cherries, put them in a bag to freeze them, put them in the freezer, or you can just slice them if you want so that the edge of the skin is broken. When you put them in the freezer, all the cells are lysed and broken open. Those then you pour into, once they're frozen, you pour into a colander in a stainless steel or a glass bowl, and the juice drains out as it melts. When that drains out as it melts, it's crystalline clear juice. You don't squeeze it or anything, it won't get all foggy. And then you can take that juice and ferment it. You can use any fruit that you want like that, and it's the essence of all the cells because they've been frozen, broken open by the freezing, and now you just let it drain by gravity. Does that make sense? So it's a very fresh fruit that you get during the height of the season when the fruit is the cheapest. Or you can go to some friend's house and, can I have your fruit? Or you can go to pick on half at a farm or something like that. So this particular method, we're using this because you can just get it at the store, it's already squeezed, all the labor's out of it, and you can use this. So I'm giving you the different aspects of what you could do. Does that make sense? To ferment, by this method, this is making alcohol out of yeast. That's basically what you're doing. To do that, you need liquid, you need sugar, and you need yeast. That's all you need. And a container to do it in, and these 2 pieces of equipment. This used to be like 10 cents. Now they're up to like $1 or $2 at the Ferment store. So if you live in Berkeley, you can go to the Oak Barrel on Gilman and San Pablo. If you live in San Francisco, you can go to the Brewcraft store, which is it's in the avenues in Clement Street, up from Clement Street, about 17th and Clement. And if you live in the East Bay, there's one, and I don't remember the address, it's in Concord or Pleasant Hill over this way, but you can look it up online. Look like Brew Store East Bay, something like that. You should be able to find it, or just in the Bay Area. And those are the 3 main ones you can go to. These are 50 cents to $1, depending on the size of your bottle. They come in different sizes, 8, 9, 10, 6, whatever. So this depends on the size of your bottle opening, not the size of the bottle. So sometimes the bottle may be pretty big and has a little opening. So you just keep a range of these, 6 to 10 or 11 or 12, and then you'll have different ones. And then you just slip this in here. This is your bubbler, so you can see it operating right now. This is a live ferment going right now. There you can see. And if you're listening, like if you want, you can put it right next to your bed at night. You can hear it fermenting. It's purring. This is what I say. My little blob is purring. So it's like I like to use a kitty cat analogy. So one of the herbal moments is if you sit down to the blood pressure thing and you're bothered by anything, you can just find, think about petting a kitty cat, your favorite pet, and immediately your blood pressure goes away if you have high blood pressure. Well, that may not be if you have high blood pressure medically, but I think it will help that too. So typically you're under high stress, thinking about petting a kitty cat usually puts you under low stress. It's just the thought process does it. So if you listen to this, you'll hear it purring. So if you pet your kitty so it purrs, this is like you're just petting your kitty. You don't even have to pet this one and it'll purr. All the petting comes up at the front. So all the goodies you put in there, that's the petting, and that's the what do they call it? That's the foreplay. It's a foreplay, and it will purr after that. It purrs, once it's finished purring, it's ready to go. But you can use it at any moment. You can mix it and then use it. So we're going to taste this one. It's not finished. It's not a finished process. And I don't recommend that you do one fermentation. I recommend you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fermentations. Primary fermentation, a secondary fermentation, a tertiary fermentation, a quaternary fermentation, a quintenary fermentation, and so on. At any step of the way, you can stop the thing, or just drink it, or whatever. But if you want to have a more sophisticated blend, you can taste it right after the first fermentation. Now, what I use, now the liquid could be just plain water and you add sugar to it, and then you add your yeast. That's it. That gives you the basic, most basic fermentation you can do. That gives you the alcohol that you would use to distill to make vodka, right? So they usually use that from the sugars that are in potatoes or whatever. I make mead because honey, everybody knows, everybody in this crowd should know that honey is healthy for you, right? Is it anybody who doesn't know that? I think that's a duh moment there. So this one, I raise my own bees. I don't like the idea that I'm a beekeeper, but essentially when you take honey from the bees, you're stealing from them, so you're trying to keep the bees from going wild. So I usually collect wild swarms. I never buy any honey, any bees, but this is all collected from the hives that I have. So you can use any honey that you wish, but this is where my sugar source is. This is what I'm feeding them, yes. Yes?
I've heard that if you, and I do it myself, you add cinnamon to it, helps your allergic system. It's an allergy.
I add all kinds of things to these, and cinnamon is one of the good products to add. I never add enough herbal products or anything to give it the actual flavor of that product where you can say, oh, it's got that in there. I always add just enough where you're going, what is that? Oh, that's familiar, right? So you got the benefits of it, but you can't, you're not just, or else I add a whole bunch of things that they're all so strong each other that you can't distinguish one particular one out of all the rest of them that are very flavorful. Does that make sense? So I use turbo yeast. You say, turbo yeast? That sounds cheap. Well, it's not cheap yeast. It's a specialized yeast. This is a high alcohol yeast. It's a champagne yeast. Champagne meaning it's a high alcohol. And you can make it champagne style so it stays bubbling after you make it, but what the purpose of this yeast is, it takes, there's a 24-hour version and a 48-hour version. Sometimes the 24 is not available, but you can go to the same brew stores I told you about and you can get that there. This is about $5 or so. I think it's gone, oh, it's $8.95, sorry. It's gone up since when I first started. It says 14% in 48 hours, 14% alcohol in 48 hours. 20% in 5 days. So one of the highest alcohol yeast that you can get is this one. The maximum number that I know of, the magic number in brewing, is 22%. You can't go higher beer, alcohol, wine, mead, whatever, than 22%. It kills, the organism itself kills itself with its own waste product. So basically what you're using the alcohol in here is poo off of the bacteria. What their poo is what we like, right? So you can add whatever you want here, and it will be fermenting these things. And some of these are little factory organisms. They're making all kinds of goodies out of the goodies that you put in here. So in addition to the alcohol, they might be increasing or decreasing or modifying the goodies that you put in here. Now that might mean that, well, some of the flavors in there are better or worse or whatever. So this requires some experience as a fermenter to know whether what you are getting is going to be good or not. But you basically do everything clean. You put in the organism you want, and it will create the environment that keeps it going, so to speak. And so we can fend off any other organisms, but you don't want to put in a bunch of dirt in there at the same time because you're going to have multitudes of other organisms in there besides the yeast that you want. But if those other organisms need to live in dirt, they're not going to like living in sugar, which the yeast does like. So you're basically creating a thing that's what they like, but you always keep it clean. So there's not bad flavors or bad products and stuff that's being created. Does that make sense? So it does require some experience, but I've been doing this for years. It's very easy to do, and that's why I'm showing you the simple version. And basically you have your own taste buds. So what you do is you taste the thing before you ferment it, and you say, that seems, I think that's going to come out nice. if you're going to be like, I know some vintners that live up in Sonoma and so forth, and they pay them for their tongues, basically. They pay them to taste the wines and make sure it's all coming out good and all that every step of the way. So they pay them for their tongue. Anybody can do this, but you want to have a tongue that's basically mainstream enough so whatever you like is what other people are going to be like. If your tongue isn't very mainstream, the things that you think taste good, they may not be so great for the average person as far as flavors go. Does that make sense? So everybody's tongue is different, but if yours has certain things that you really like, that doesn't mean you can't also tell what the average person would like. And that's the kind of a tongue you would need to have. Does that make sense? To make a valuable, in-demand ferment. So this right here is these three mixed equally together, basically. And an addition of this much honey, the amount right down to here from the first batch. Now, I could have added more for this much ferment, but I don't like, because most people know that honey is anti-biological, antimicrobial. It will fend off, it will kill things, including it could kill yeast. So you don't use very much of it because the yeast can still live on the sugars in there and not be attacked by the antimicrobial attributes of the honey itself. So you don't add a lot of honey on the first batch. You ferment it till it's finished, and when you say it's finished, the bubbling stops because it's used up all of the sugar making alcohol and carbon dioxide. Does that make sense? As soon as it uses it all up, it becomes what we call a dry wine. There's no more sweetness to it. If you have too much sugar in there, then by the time it uses up all the alcohol, or it uses up all the sugar, it won't use it all up before it kills itself making alcohol. Does that make sense? So if you get above 20, maybe it's only adapted so that the yeast that you're using might be a different kind of yeast than this one, and it goes only up to 9% before it kills itself. It can't tolerate 10% alcohol. It kills itself at 9%, so you'll get a 9% alcohol out of that. But this one, you can keep fermenting it by adding a little bit more honey at every step, increasing the alcohol in here by not using too much honey at each step. But the advantage to this is, at every step, you can modify your ferment so that you add other herbal products or other products, flowers, herbs, nectars, whatever you want to your little elixir batch here, and you test it by your own taste buds at every moment, at every step, so to speak. Does that make sense? So, I'm giving you the overall thing about this is a beginner talk, but I'm giving you the nuances of what you think about, so you give you the package deal if you want to get into this and take it to its limits. Whatever you're interested in may be different than what I'm interested in. But I never make my, can't say that. I do make my ferments with sugars that I put fruit in. So here's another thing that you can do, and that is, and while I'm talking, I'm just going to add these other ones to here. I'm just going to show you. This is a clean jar. Obviously, this is a recycled milk bottle, but it works well. This is a ½ gallon instead of a gallon, but I usually use gallons. But they're not as, I bike and board everywhere. One of the things that hopefully keeps me young. So I have less to have to carry with a ½ gallon than a 1 gallon. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, just pour in this juice to here. And so I intentionally made this batch. Oops, I forgot to shake that up. Let me pour a little back in here and get all the, you can see some goodies there still hanging around, some solids. So I'm going to add those back in. There's a little bit of cloudiness that's involved there, but if you want to, you can add sugar, but I never add plain sugar. What I do is, I know what kind of stuff that I want to put into my batch, and so what I do is, say, there's cherries coming out, or blueberries, or whatever the fruit is that's on the market at the moment that I really want to have plenty of, and maybe it's a special variety also. How many of you go to Trader Joe's and you see the things called angel cots in the summertime? White apricots. Those, I have a tree of that myself, the original tree that they get up. It's actually called cotton candy is the actual breed of tree that does that. But the marketing label is called angel cots. At least theirs, at least at Trader Joe's is. Other places may call it something different when they have them on the market. Some I've heard it called snow apricots and other things because they're white apricots. Very sweet, very juicy. So what you can do is you can take those apricots. When you pick them right off the tree, you can pick them, oh, tomorrow at 3 o'clock, that one's going to be ready. And oh, this one's ready right now. And you just pluck it and pop it right in. And it's, oh, God, it's so good right off the tree. But if you want, you can take it right off the tree at its primo amount, slice it in half, take out the seed, and plant that. So you want to get more of those trees. There won't be the same genetics, but they might be better or worse. Take that. They also might just be different genetics, and they will help pollinate your tree. But you take those fruit, and now you slice them in half, and add them to a bag, and freeze a bunch of them. And then, when you take them out, all the cells are lysed. You put them in a wide-mouthed jar with a lid, and in the jar you fill about half full and completely cover them with sugar and shake it all up, and then add some extra sugar. Plain white sugar. Yeah, plain white sugar. But that plain white sugar is now going to suck all the juices off of those peaches or apricots or cherries that you just got through putting in there. All those goodies that are inside those cherries now go into that sugar. You're not going to be eating that sugar. The yeast is going to eat the sugar. You will then get all the goodies that the yeast will take and ramp up or modify a little bit in your ferment, but the yeast will be eating the sugar and won't be going into your diet. You will get all the goodies off of the fruit. Does that make sense? Now, that sucks it out, and it preserves it also, because that high sugar content keeps bacteria from getting in there, because what happens? It also sucks the juices right out of bacteria. So most bacteria can't live in that. Most bugs that you would not want to have can't live in that. That's why it's a preservative, just like salt is a preservative. Does that make sense? But with sugar, you can ferment that sugar, and so what you do is take that juice that comes off. It's got really strong cherry flavor or really strong peach flavor, and you add a shot of that to whatever you're brewing. You're feeding, and then you can add it at any one of the levels of fermenting you're doing. You need some more sugar? Add some more sugar, fruit sugar, or honey, or whatever. Then you now have, and notice this is actually purring. As we sit here and it warms up in this room, it's purring more and more. So anyway, now I have, let's see, one thing you also want to do is fill it up about to the shoulder of whatever bottle you're using.
Is that a gallon?
This is a half gallon.
Half gallon.
I only use it because, as I say, it's easier to carry on my bike.
Okay.
So I think I can go ahead and pour the rest of this in here, so I'm not wasting just this one little batch. Anyone who wants to have a taste of this now, I'm going to put a lid on here.
That's just the juice, right? You didn't put the honey.
Nothing's added to it at all right now. So what I'm doing is, if anybody wants to, I'm going to add a little of this, and you can take a little taste test out of here if you want. Don't try to drink the whole thing, but you can pour off a little cup of this if you want, just to taste what it tastes like right now before you do anything.
What's the alcohol level now? Right?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
Right now, there's nothing in this.
Oh, okay.
This is the blend pre-yeast.
Okay.
Pre-yeast. Now, since
pre-mother, yeah.
Good. Lots of astringencies in there, which is good for you. So anybody who wants to taste that, you're welcome to. I won't do it at the moment, but now, what you do now is you take this and you add some yeast to it. But first I want to add the honey to it, right? So now, I normally warm this up. What we could do is just sit in there, but it's warmed up enough. It's not cold or anything at the moment. When I live on a farm, on a ranch, and I sleep in a tree cabin, and I work in a barn. And oftentimes there's no electricity. I don't like using electricity. And so I do have solar lights, but I don't use solar garden lights, that's about it. But in the barn there is electricity, but not for heating and things like that. So oftentimes the honey is very cold, so I need to warm up the honey, otherwise I can't get it out of the jar into this one. So right now though, what I'm going to do is stir this up a little bit. So I'm going to shake it around, and it's spinning, and then I pour the honey in. While it's still spinning, I pour the honey in, so it's having a chance to mix with the juice. Does that make sense? And I could shake it as I pour it in so it's a little bit better mixed and all that. But sometimes what you can do is just warm up the honey by adding some juice to the jar. You can put it in the microwave. Some people, oh, microwave! No! But you can also just put it into a water bath, a hot water bath, and it will warm up the honey in the juice, shake it all up, and it's looser, and then when you add it to this, it blends better to the rest of the batch. Does that make sense? So right now, anyone who wants to, you can stick your finger in the honey jar and taste what my Las Trampas honey tastes like. That is coming from Moraga, California, where I live, up in a valley right below the Las Trampas peak. So it's called, I call it Las Trampas honey.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So you're seeing herbalism in action right now, right? So this is how you do it, chef style. I haven't measured nothing, right? Oh, about a third of this, third of that, and you know what I'm saying. It's like, okay, it's all got to fit in here. We want to leave. There's practical reasons why you do everything. I'm saying out loud the thought processes that are involved, not giving you any particular recipes or anything. So now, notice the honey is still on the bottom here. So basically, I keep having to shake this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this upside down. Got my thumb on the little opening there, and I'm shaking it now to mix the honey better into everything else. Does that make everybody understand what's going on? If I would normally, this is just for this demo, normally I would warm it up like you say, and it will mix in better. And so that has gotten a little bit of it is at the top. But if I keep shaking this and it's a little bit room temperature warm, this is warmer than where I live. In the barn, on a sunny day like today, it's warm outside. We've had January weather, which is warmer than July weather where I live. We got fog in the summertime here. So I think that's pretty well mixed. Does everybody understand? Now I'm going to pour a little bit off. Notice I can give you samples of this. So there's the straight up stuff, and here's the stuff with the honey added. This is so you can taste it by your own taste buds and know what it is we're doing. So I have a little batch of this. I'm going to put this over here. So this is the first batch with nothing in it except the juice. This is the batch with the juice and the honey. And I'm going to take this and taste it myself. Now that the honey's in there, yeah, it's some sweetness. It's still very tart and astringent, which you want for your. It also, when you have astringent and tart fruit, you like the sweet stuff to feed the juice, feed the sugars to the yeast. But you do want to have these other astringencies because that's a way you can tell from your taste buds that it's got a lot of goodies in there for you. Does that make sense? So we take. And when I say goodies, I'm talking about all the nutritional values and all the herbal values that would be in, and medicinal values that would be in the products that you're putting in there. So, now this one is ready to go. All we have to do now at this point is take a bubbler and put it on there.
You didn't put the yeast in yet?
Not yet, you're right. There's one more thing we have to do. So, I happen to have a larger, this is number 8, and this is number 7. So this 7 fits perfect into this bottle. So yes, she says, what about the yeast? That is one fundamental thing I almost didn't put in, but I would have remembered it sooner or later. Old timers are not, right? So we take this, and I've already cut it open, so I just use a little duct tape to hold it closed. I fold it over several times and then use duct tape to hold it closed, and I put it in the fridge to keep it preserved. And during the season I end up using it up. So I'm going to add about this much. You can see how much is coming out. For this batch size of, I'd say a tablespoon or 2. For this size jug. That's going to be lots of yeast. And you can smell the cloud of dust that was coming out. That's your yeasty smell. You will notice the smell. You might even... Everybody smell that? I will pass it around so you can smell it. I could also pour some in a cup and you can smell that. So I'm adding about About a tablespoon or two. As I say, I'm just guesstimating on this always, based on experience and so forth. However, this is the yeast that you're adding, so even if you add 1 tablespoon instead of 2, at some point 2 or 3 or 4 isn't going to it's going to add flavor to this, because there's stuff in there to help the yeast, and you don't want to add a whole bunch more yeast, then it's going to affect the flavor of your batch. So now I have about this much yeast in there right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this and stir it up and mix it. Otherwise, if I pour it in there, it's going to be, the surface tension is not going to be broken on here. It's going to be all very difficult to mix and have it. So right now, I just filled this up, and oh, it looks like juice. Well, on the bottom, you got a bunch of white yeast caked on there, so that's not what you want. So what I'm going to do is take this and my stirring rod here. If I was doing this at home, I have stainless steel equipment and things like that that I use, but obviously I don't have to have that here. And if you want, you can use all kinds of wild berries and goodies like that, but whenever I go out and collect wild berries, I'm always tasting these things. And oh, this particular bush, wow, that one's extra special. I'm going to take seeds or cuttings off of that bush, bring it home, propagate it, and then plant more of that out there because I like the genetics of that one. Does that make sense? And then you're doing responsible wild crafting by going back into the wild with the stuff you have crafted at home. Does that make sense? So not only are you getting the benefits of wild crafting, the wild is getting the benefits of wild crafting, of your personal cultivation. Okay, so now I just blew out the yeast that went up inside this thing. And now I've stirred it around. It's not little chunks floating on top or anything anymore. It's now wet. If we don't break the surface tension, it will cake up into the let's see if this is working fully now. I think it is. Yeah. So now it's more like a mud. Not exactly, but it's now going to distribute through the brew much better. And that is always a problem with your yeast, whatever kind you're using, not just turbo yeast, any kind. When it's that dry, you have to get it wet before you just add it straight up to your thing. Now you can just put it in the bottle and shake the whole bottle up. But if you do, you're going to have the whole bottle coated with not just the yeast, but you will also have it coated, you'll have it coated not just with the juice, but also with the yeast. And if you do that, I'm just going to pour this in now. If you look inside, it's all juice. There's no caking left anywhere. So all the surface tension is now broken. I have a long stainless steel spoon with a small spoon on the end of it. I use that for stirring. So you sometimes have to look a long time to find that in the store. Now, ugh, yeast tastes horrible. You know what nutritional yeast tastes like straight up? They make vegan cheese out of it, mixing it with walnuts and stuff. This tastes sort of like that. However, straight up by itself it's a little bit, but obviously I eat it. So so now I'm going to give this one more shake, and and now this was the cup that had the yeast in it, so I'm just add a little batch of here. So here's the finished batch as is, without any goodies added to it. I mean, there's goodies in here, but and if you want to, you don't have to add anything else. This could be your mother to ferment to get it going, and then on the secondary, tertiary, quaternary, quintiary ferments, you can add other stuff to it. So I'm, once again, pouring out some of this. So you can see we're back down to pretty much shoulder level in here. And I've made 3 samples out of here. So if anybody wants to, you can take a little bit of this. Let me just taste that. Use the same cup each time so you don't waste cups, but yeah, that's good.
That has the yeast in it now, but it's just beginning.
This is now ready to ferment.
Yeah.
Now at this moment, I'm good to go.
Right.
I can just add this. I have to put some water in here, and you raise the water level to right about here. So when you pour the water in here at the sink, it will fill this contraption up to right about here in these 2 little bubbles. As the pressure develops in here, it pushes through with carbon dioxide, and pushes against here, and so the water keeps stuff, outside organisms and spores and stuff, from getting into your batch. So what happens is there's this is a airlock. So basically the air is pushing through the carbon dioxide, and when it does, it blows through and it'll bubble up just like this one's happening. So you can see it's pushing down here and coming out there, and it bubbles right there. So all the bubbling is happening in this one.
So you fill it to the
You fill it up to somewhere midway on both of them, and then as it's pushing out, you don't want to fill it up so much it's overflowing when the water comes out. But once that's happening, this is under pressure now in here. So you can add a bubble. If you don't have these things, you want to spend money on them, or just put a balloon on it. You can see it swelling up. You can put a lid on this, but basically put a cup over it upside down, and then as the carbon dioxide comes up, it overflows and goes down the side.
So if you buy one of those, if you fill it, you said fill it about half, it's like halfway up with water. Right?
About halfway up with water in here.
And then there's a seal on the top, that's why it's not...
No, this comes with a seal. You can put the seal on there, but it's not sealable. It's just, it's loose, and the gas can come out.
Yeah,
but it keeps stuff from going back. It's a secondary prevention, but the water is what prevents backflow, so to speak. Does that make sense? So you could probably make one of these yourself by using some little tubing, plastic tubing. There's all kinds of ways people get around this, but it doesn't ultimately matter. If it's covered with a little cup on top, the carbon dioxide is coming out, and you can just see if it's bubbling or not. Is it bubbling? Then it's still brewing. Does that make sense? So 24, 48 hours is all you need for this to be going, and then it's made all the alcohol it's going to make off of that batch when it stops bubbling. If you want, then open it up, add some more honey to it, and close it up again. And it should take off and do some more because it used up all the honey. You keep doing it until it uses up all the honey that you give it, and it cannot make any more alcohol because the alcohol it has made kills it. It's dying of its own waste products. Does that make sense? That will not be able to go higher than that amount of alcohol. And basically, this much alcohol, there's very few yeasts and other organisms that can tolerate 20% alcohol, much less 22%.
How do you know how, after 24, 48 hours, that's about the max? And if you
but it says in here, you still watch this. So I usually do it on a weekend, and then the following weekend, that's when I will do the secondary ferment.
Or you do it 2 or 3 times before you drink it, right?
I do it, well, no, sometimes I do it and taste it every time. I go, oh, this is really good after the first batch. Yeah, I'm not bothering. I'll start another batch. I really like this. Or I have a party or some friends are over and we end up drinking more than we thought or something like that. Once I know, oh, that's a really good batch and I've got a bunch more of that same fruit or juice or whatever, then I can make a bunch more because I really like this. It's the right season, I can make a bunch more of it. So I only make small batches totally for the reason that I can have a whole bunch of jars out there and I can crank a whole bunch of wine, but if I make a big 5-gallon carboy, it takes a lot of fruit and stuff, and I may have used up everything, and then if that batch goes bad or it's not that great, I'm stuck with 5 gallons of the same thing.
So how much do you leave in there to add more juice and more honey, or you just add honey?
I just add more honey only.
Oh, just the honey. Okay.
Yeah, and in the process of tasting, the level's going to go down. If it's getting too high, I only put it in here because I don't want this to froth up so much that it overflows and gets up into here. And it sometimes can get really volcanically vigorous. Like you got the blob is cranking. If it's cranking, this can froth up so much that you put stuff up in here. I used to use raw fruit and stuff in there, and I take the fruit out now because it makes a scum on the top, a hovering scum, and oftentimes that it fills up and pops out as a plug, and that's too messy. So what I do now is I just take the fruit, freeze it, and take the refined juice out of that. Does that make sense? And then there's no particulate matter in here that can froth up and come out. So if I make them in small batches, if I like them, I can take all of them, they roughly taste the same, then I can mix them together as a finished batch.
How long have you been fermenting this one here?
This one?
No,
this one I started 2 days ago, intentionally, and then so I would have the same juice. This has just been refrigerated, and this is only 2 days old. So whatever you taste on here, let me taste it right now. I have not tasted it, so let me pop the lid on here. Remember, it's still coming out with carbon dioxide. So if I pop the lid on this one...
So is that going to taste carbonated?
In a sense, yes, because it is carbonated. It's full of carbon dioxide because this is natural carbonation, not what they'll stick they do carbonation fake nowadays, and people think that that's the real thing. No, this is real carbonation here. And if you want real carbonation like champagne carbonation, all you do is add a hair bit of more honey to it after you bottle it. But if it's all finished, you add just a touch of honey to it, and that's requires a lot of experience because you want to blow up the bottles. When you seal the bottle, it makes carbonation inside because it's still brewing. It produces high pressure in there, and that's when you pop the lid off the champagne. Those bottles need to be able to support that pressure that's coming, or you'll blow up the bottle. And that happens with a lot of people's ferment. Champagne requires, most of this doesn't require a lot of skills, but to get that critical thing where you can build up the pressure and get the champagne bubbly, but without blowing up the bottle, that's a critical skill that you need to have. On most of these, sure. Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Anybody want to try this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, herbal moment here, or herbal advice here. On your alcohol, yes, if you go 20% alcohol in here for a brew, this is not distilled stuff. If you want, you can distill this, but distilling is a whole different art form. This is just the fermentation part. The art of fermentation, you are adding alcohol to this because you're having the yeast brew up the sugars that are in there and turn them into alcohol. The alcohol itself is herbal in moderation. Now, you obviously can have alcoholics, there's all kinds of things, but to this, if you have high alcohol up to 20% in here, that high alcohol can be used as a solvent to extract other things. And you can put your herbs in there or other things that you would normally make an herbal extract out of alcohol. You can use your wine, your mead, to do that. Does that make sense? Yeah. If what I do, and this is a finished batch right here, this batch is not just to brew. This batch here, this is several years old. It's aged. It's turned from this color, and this is prickly pear, candy cap, mushroom, mead with a bunch of other herbal extracts added to it. I do rose petal extracts, so in the summer all of my Chrysler Imperial and Double Delight roses are in bloom. Take the flowers off of those, put them into alcohol all summer long, 95% alcohol, ethanol, and then after 2 weeks all the bushes are in bloom again, so I squeeze out those rose petals, add the next batch, squeeze out those rose petals in 2 weeks and add the next batch using the same alcohol, and by the end of summer that's really red, really fragrant juice. That's real rose petal extract, not the fake stuff that you get in the store. Now that I supplement in here by fortifying the finished mead to bring it up above 22%. That kills the ferment, no more fermenting happens, and every single herbal extract that I put in here, including ginseng, candy cap mushrooms, rose petal extract, and a bunch of other herbs, some of which are proprietary, I add to this, and I'm adding them not just for the herbal values, but also for the flavor that it imparts to the finished mead. Does that make sense? So every ferment is going to taste different when you make it, and then when you add the herbal extracts to it to kill the ferment, that preserves your elixir at somewhere around 25% to 30% alcohol, depending on what you add to it. I don't make this as strong as vodka, which is 40%. Does that make sense? This is not distilled. When I finish it, it's fortified, which is different than distilling. Does that make sense to everyone? So,
what's the difference between that and that? I missed it.
This right here is just the ferment. This right here is aged ferment that has been fortified after it finished the last ferment. I killed the ferment by adding herbal extracts, high 95% alcohol extracts. I can take the volume that's in here and know how much to calculate to add almost 100% alcohol that has herbs of various kinds in it that I made myself from extracts. I don't trust what I get in the store because maybe, who knows, but this is Ken's brew.
Right.
This is Ken's brew, so I make all of my own extracts and then I know what I have. And I also know that, well, I'm using 95% alcohol, I can add this much. Oh, just this much rose petal extract is not going to bring it up to 25% alcohol or 30% alcohol, but I can add that. Oh yes, that brings it up just so I can say, oh yes, it's got real rose petal extract flavor in there. Ah, great, that's really good. But nobody's going to tell that there's real rose petal, because most people don't know what rose petals taste like, right? So when you add all these different herbs to it, how much time do I have? I'm getting close.
Yeah,
We'll do some.
yeah, like just a couple minutes.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do some taste tests on this, and
Yeah,
then
that's a good idea.
so that way you add the ferments that you want to add to it to give all the flavors and the elixirs, because I don't just add alcohol to this. Yes, if you were to drink a big bunch of this, that would be you're going to get smashed. But you don't drink a big bunch. You've got a lot of. When I make my herbal extracts, I do like ginseng and other roots and stuff. I put them in the alcohol, grind them up, powder them, put them in the alcohol. After 2 or 3 weeks, and they're shaking it every day at high alcohol, I take all of that root out and put fresh root in. Same alcohol. I brew that for another, steep that for another few weeks. Take that out and put another one in. So it's at least 3 extracts packed into that alcohol. That's a lot of power put into that. So when you add a little bit to it, ooh, the bitters on those things really are intense. At the end process, I wait until it's all figured out and finished. Secret here, I add a little dash of smoked salt to it too. It stimulates your taste buds, and then all the flavors really fly out. But most people, you add salt here, whoa! Well, your taste buds really appreciate that. However, I wait until the very end and I sweeten it just enough, and that depends on what all the things are in there. I wait until the end, add just enough honey to the whole thing, and the ferment's killed, to sweeten it just barely to cut some of the bitterness in there. And then it's a really complex flavor, and your mouth is going to go, oh, wow. And most of the time, some people may be able to detect some of the things I put in here, but I always try to make it so that, on my best batches, it's like, wow, that's so familiar. What is that? And most people can't tell what it is. Some people can really pick up on some things because they're really familiar with those flavors, and they can ask me, is that in there? But then they won't know all the other things I added to it. Does that make sense? Any questions? Does that pretty much cover? Does everybody understand how to do your own batch if you want to?
I'd like to taste it. I heard about it. Now I want to taste it.
Okay.
You know?
So this is the brew. This is the brew that I made, and there's 3 jars here. If you want sample cups, come up, but let's not bump the table. If you'll come up, let me give you a.
I'm excited.
Which one do you want?
The blueberry.
The blueberry. You want the raw batch here?
No, the one you just got through throwing
The
everything
fermented
in.
one.
That's
He wants
it. That's
Yeah.
this right
The
here.
more fermented, the
that
better.
one.
This one's not fermented. This
Well,
is.
whatever
He
it
wants
is.
the
I want
fermented
to
one
taste
right
it.
there.
Okay, hold on. Hold on. This one's
Come on,
fermented.
let's get
Now you go. Now you're trying.
This is fermented.
Right.
That's what he was
Here's you a little batch there.
Good.
Anybody
Well, I
else?
am.
I'll take some.
All right, I'll pass this one around first. How's
Yeah.
that? Now you can
That's
add. We can add the ants to either of these,
Yes,
and then
okay.
ferment, and then in a few
Yeah.
days we can test that. Or Vadim can. Who?
And that was a tertiary blend?
That's good.
That
I'll
one?
give you
This
guys
one
a
is
spoon if you wanna
this
add
one is a
any
primary
ants to it.
blend. It has not been blended. This one here is like 5 blends here.
Wait, wait.
This one is aged. This was
Which was the one that you
No,
had
no, no,
brewing
no,
right
no.
there, the purring one?
this one.
That is that one.
This is this one right here. This is purring. This is the purr. This is still purring. You will taste the purr.
Yeah. that's
The
good.
carbonation is the purr, and you will taste the purr here.
In here.
Who else?
How much
And you-
alcohol would you say is actually in there?
Well, less than 20%.
Yeah? Okay.
I never guess on that. There's various ways you can test it, and I don't bother with that anymore.
You can top it off. We'll take it.
Oh, top it off.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's good.
Do you think that tastes good?
It tastes good.
Yeah.
Do you want it?
Kind of tastes like kombucha, a little bit,
Well, sometimes it may.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things, but sometimes,
but sweeter.
yeah.
Sweeter.
What percentage do you think of alcohol is in there right now?
Well, it's not used up all of the sugars because it's still sweet.
Yeah.
So I would say it might be 8 to 10%.
Yeah.
You
Tastes
think?
like about a wine level.
Does it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say somewhere in that vicinity. I would say if it went another week, it might be up to 20%. But
Yeah, you can put some herbs in here. Some
Yes.
rosemary.
Yep. Well, you can put rosemary if you want. Some of the herbs are more savory, and so it requires, because people's taste buds are going to say, oh, well, that's kind of savory. If it tastes Italian, then you may have to be more careful about the kinds of things you add. But rosemary can be a very good one to add. to a lot of things. But I add my herbs dry and powdered. Now, when you add them dry and powdered, you're obviously adding an herb that's covered with all kinds of yeasts and bacteria from spores in the air and where they were growing, because I don't sterilize anything. But that's not going to overpower the yeast that's in there. Does that make sense? But it might affect the brewing colony of organisms that are mixed in there. So you have to remember that any herbs you add to it